On my 75th birthday, a landmark I hadn't even planned to acknowledge, my sister Vivian looked at me from across the long dining table and smiled. "Delilah," she said, her voice clear and carrying, "tell me, are you enjoying your $500,000 trust fund?" I stared back at her, confused. The words felt incomplete, like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't assemble. Slowly, the question finally registered, and I felt a tight knot forming in my chest. "What trust fund are you talking about?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. My son Reggie dropped his fork. My daughter-in-law, Chelsea, went pale, like a sheet of plaster. They both looked as though they wished the polished marble floor of their own suburban estate would simply open up and swallow them whole. Then, Vivian turned her gaze on them, using that firm, no-nonsense tone I knew from her corporate life. "What did you two do with the money?" she demanded. The silence that followed wasn't normal. It was heavy. It was guilty. It was the kind of silence that screams the truths no one wants to hear. That night, the air in the house didn't smell like a birthday celebration. It smelled like a goodbye, the kind you sense coming but refuse to name. I was sitting at the head of the table, as usual, feeling like little more than an ornament among the expensive dinnerware and crystal glasses I never owned in my own small apartment. 75 years old, 75 years. And my son Reggie had insisted so strongly on celebrating my birthday in his opulent house that I couldn't refuse. Not because I wanted to be there, but because a mother never stops searching for her children's affection, even if it costs her dignity. My name is Delilah Ames. I was born in a neighborhood where women were taught from girlhood to be quiet, to obey, to smile, even when everything inside was breaking. I married young, I had 2 children, I was widowed 5 years ago, and since then, I've lived alone in a cramped 1-bedroom unit in a place called The Heights, surviving on a small Social Security pension that barely covers my groceries. Reggie lives in a 3-story house with a sprawling lawn and a pool. Chelsea, my daughter-in-law, wears designer clothes and leases a new SUV every 2 years. My grandchildren attend private preparatory schools where the monthly tuition costs more than my rent for 3 months combined. I always believed they just worked incredibly hard, that they deserved it all, and that I had no right to ask for anything because I had already done my part by raising them. But that night, when Vivian spoke those words, something inside me finally broke. Or perhaps it simply woke up. Vivian Ellington is my younger sister. She's 70 years old and lives 2 states away. She's successful, running her own consulting firm, traveling the world, wearing tailored suits and French perfume. We don't see each other often, maybe once or twice a year. It's not because we don't get along, but because our lives took completely different paths. She built an empire. I built a family. Or so I thought. Vivian arrived that night with a gift wrapped in gold paper and a bottle of fine wine that surely cost more than my month's worth of groceries. She gave me a strong hug like always. She told me I looked good, though we both knew it was a lie. I was thinner, more tired, dimmer. She sat next to me and started talking about her trips, her projects, and life in general. Reggie and Chelsea offered strained smiles from across the table. My grandchildren were upstairs in their rooms, probably glued to their phones. The conversation was superficial, awkward, filled with long pauses that no one knew how to fill. Then, Vivian poured herself more wine, looked at me with that focused expression she always had when she was about to say something important, and said, "Delilah, I've been curious about something for a long time." I nodded, having no idea what was coming. "Are you enjoying your $500,000 trust fund?" she asked casually, as if asking about the weather. The world stopped. My ears buzzed. $500,000, a trust fund. I didn't understand a thing. I looked at Vivian as if she were speaking an entirely different language. "What trust fund are you talking about?" I asked, my voice so small I almost didn't recognize it as my own. Vivian frowned. She looked straight at me. "The trust fund your husband set up for you before he passed. You're not using it." I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet. My husband, my late husband, a trust fund. He never spoke to me about it. I never saw documents. I never received any money. Nothing, absolutely nothing. I don't know anything about that, I murmured, feeling the sting of tears in my eyes. Vivian placed her wine glass on the table with a dry thud. Her face hardened. She was no longer the kind sister who arrived with gifts. She was the relentless businesswoman who tolerated neither lies nor betrayal. She turned to Reggie and Chelsea, who were frozen like statues. "What did you do with the money?" she asked in a voice so cold it seemed to drop the temperature in the room. Reggie cleared his throat. He tried to smile. "Aunt Vivian, I think there's a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding," Vivian cut him off. "I was present when your father signed those documents. I was a witness. $500,000 in an irrevocable trust for Delilah, with clear instructions that she was to receive monthly payments for life. Where is that money?" Chelsea stood up so quickly, her chair nearly toppled over. "I need to go to the bathroom," she mumbled, practically sprinting from the room. Reggie stayed put, opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. His eyes avoided mine. And in that moment, I knew my sister was telling the truth. I knew my son had robbed me. I knew that everything he had, everything he flaunted, everything that made me feel like a burden, had been built with my money. "Mama," Reggie began, using that whiny child's voice he used when he'd done something wrong. "Let me explain." But I raised my hand. I didn't want to hear it. Not yet. First, I needed to understand. I needed to process. I needed to breathe. Vivian pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Elias Carter," she stated firmly. "The attorney who handled your father's trust. He has all the copies, all the documents, everything." Reggie paled even further. "Auntie, that's not necessary." "Oh, yes, it is necessary," Vivian replied, already dialing the number. I remained seated, staring at my untouched plate. My head was spinning. My husband had left me $500,000. $500,000. I had been living on less than $800 a month, skipping meals, wearing worn-out clothes, feeling like a burden to my son. And all that time, he had my money. Tears began to fall. I couldn't stop them. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, humiliation, and a betrayal so profound it fractured my soul. Vivian ended the call and put her hand over mine. "Elias is coming here," she said softly. "We're going to fix this, I promise you." Reggie remained frozen, his face flushed and his forehead sweaty. Chelsea hadn't returned from the bathroom. The birthday celebration, which was supposed to be a party, had turned into a trial, and I, the guest of honor, was the only one who hadn't known I was the victim of a crime. To understand how I arrived at that moment, sitting at that table feeling like an idiot, you need to go back in time with me. You need to see who I was before that night, before discovering that my own blood had stolen the life I deserved. I had always been the invisible woman, the one who served the coffee but never drank it, the one who cooked for everyone but ate the leftovers, the one who listened to everyone's problems but never spoke of her own. That's how I was raised. That's how I raised my children. That's how I lived for 75 years. My husband Jeremiah passed away 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack. He was a hard-working man, honest and quiet, like me. He worked his whole life as an accountant for a mid-sized firm. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't starving either. We had a modest house, an old car, a simple life. Or so I thought. When he died, I was devastated, not just by the pain of losing him, but because I felt completely lost. He handled all the money, all the paperwork, all the important decisions. I only signed where he told me to sign. I never questioned, never doubted. I trusted him completely. Reggie took charge of everything after the funeral. He organized the paperwork. He spoke with the attorneys. He explained that Dad had left some debts and that the pension I would receive would be small. He told me we needed to sell the family house to cover those obligations. I accepted everything without question. What did I know about finance? What did I know about law? I moved into a tiny apartment in a distant neighborhood, a one-bedroom unit with a minuscule kitchen and a bathroom that constantly had plumbing problems. The rent was $350 a month. My pension was $800. I budgeted every day to make ends meet. I bought the cheapest food at the supermarket. I walked instead of taking the bus to save $1. I turned off the lights as soon as I left a room. Reggie visited me once a month, maybe. He was always rushed, always with his phone in his hand. He would hand me $200 and tell me it was all he could spare. I would thank him as if he were giving me the world. $200 made the difference between eating chicken or just rice that week. Chelsea never came with him. She said she was busy with the kids, with work, with a million things. The few times I saw her, she looked at me with a mix of pity and disdain, as if I were an old piece of furniture that was no longer useful but couldn't be thrown out. My grandchildren treated me like a stranger. When Reggie invited me to their house for the holidays, they barely greeted me. They would rush upstairs to their rooms, filled with expensive toys and giant screens. I stayed downstairs, sitting in the enormous living room, feeling small, feeling out of place. I looked at their house and couldn't understand how my son had achieved so much. 3 floors, marble tiles, imported furniture, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Chelsea showed off her designer handbags. Reggie talked about his investments. I thought maybe he was smarter than his father, more ambitious, more capable. I never suspected that everything he had was mine. The days in my apartment were all the same. I woke up early, even though I had nothing to do. I drank watery coffee because the good stuff was too expensive. I looked out the window at people rushing to their jobs, their lives, their purpose. I didn't have one anymore. I cleaned the apartment, even though it was already clean. I watched soap operas I didn't care about just to hear voices other than my own. I cooked for one person, and I had leftovers that I saved for the next day and the day after that. My neighbors were kind, but distant. Everyone worked. Everyone had busy families. I was the old lady in apartment 203, the one who said hello in the hallway, the one who never caused trouble, the one who paid her rent on time by selling some of the few pieces of jewelry I had left when the money ran out. I had one friend, Paulette. She lived in the unit next door. She was a widow too, but she had a better pension. Her children called her every day, visited on weekends, and paid for her trips. I envied her in silence. Paulette noticed things. She asked me why my son was never around, why I wore the same clothes all the time, why she sometimes heard me crying at night when I thought no one could hear. One day, while having tea in her apartment, she told me something that stuck with me. "Delilah, you've always been the type to swallow everything, to endure, to keep quiet, but nobody's going to give you a medal for suffering in silence. Sometimes you have to stop swallowing. Sometimes you have to spit out what's poisoning you." I laughed nervously. I told her I was fine, that I lacked nothing, that my son did what he could for me. But Paulette looked at me steadily and shook her head. "One day you're going to wake up, Delilah, and when you do, I hope it's not too late." I didn't understand her words. Then the flashbacks came in waves. I remembered when Reggie was a child, and I worked cleaning offices to pay for his college application fees. I remembered the sleepless nights when he was sick, and I didn't have money for a doctor, but I took him anyway. I remembered selling my wedding ring to pay for his university tuition. I also remembered how he started to be ashamed of me as he grew up, how he stopped introducing me to his friends, how he asked me not to pick him up from school because the other kids made fun of my old clothes, like when he married Chelsea and they sat me in the last pew of the church as if I were just another guest, not the groom's mother. I always told myself it was normal, that children grow up and drift away, that I had to understand I couldn't be a burden. That word, burden, how many times had I heard it? How many times had I told myself, I don't want to be a burden. I can't ask them for more. They've done enough for me. I'm fine alone. Lies. All lies I repeated to myself so I wouldn't have to face the truth. The truth that my son had emotionally abandoned me long before he stole my money. The truth that I had allowed myself to be treated like trash because I believed that was love. That was being a good mother. The weeks leading up to my birthday were strange. Reggie called me more often than normal. He insisted I come to his house for the celebration. He said Chelsea was preparing something special, that the children wanted to see me. I accepted, thrilled. I thought that maybe they were finally including me, that maybe they were finally seeing me. Paulette helped me get ready that night. She lent me a nice shawl, styled my hair, and told me I looked beautiful, but she also said something else, something that sounded like a warning. If anything feels off tonight, don't stay quiet. You are worth more than you think. I laughed. I told her to stop worrying, that I was just going to have dinner with my family, that everything would be fine. But as the rideshare drove me toward Reggie's house, something in my stomach churned. A feeling I couldn't name, as if my body knew something my mind still didn't want to accept. I arrived, and the house was brightly lit. Soft music, the smell of expensive food. Reggie opened the door with a huge smile. Too huge. Chelsea greeted me with a kiss in the air beside my cheek. Too sweet. The children came down to give me a quick hug before disappearing again. Too rehearsed. Everything was too much. I sat at that enormous table, feeling lonelier than I did in my empty apartment. And then Vivian arrived. My sister, whom I didn't know would be there, whom Reggie clearly didn't expect, the one who held the key to unlock the box of lies he had so carefully built. Everything began to twist 3 weeks before my birthday, although I didn't know it then. I was still living my usual life, my small life, my day-to-day survival on $800 a month, and the illusion that things would improve someday. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in my living room watching the news when the phone rang. It was Reggie. That was already odd. He didn't call on Tuesdays, he called on Sundays, if at all, and the conversations always lasted less than 5 minutes. "Mama," he said in a strange voice, a voice trying to sound casual but filled with something I couldn't identify. "How are you?" "Fine, son. Everything good over there?" Yeah, everything's good. Hey, I wanted to talk to you about your birthday. It's coming up, right?" "My birthday. 75. I hadn't thought much about it. Why bother? There was nothing to celebrate. Just another year of loneliness, another year of counting coins. "Yes, the 23rd, I replied without much enthusiasm. "Chelsea and I want to do something special, a dinner at the house. How does that sound?" I was surprised. They never organized anything for me. I had spent my last birthday alone, eating canned soup in front of the television. "You don't have to go to any trouble," I said automatically. "I'm fine. I don't need anything." "Mama, it's no trouble. We want to do it. The kids want to be there too. It's going to be nice." Something in his tone made me uneasy. He was too insistent, too anxious, but I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that maybe my son was finally seeing me, that maybe he finally cared. "Okay," I accepted. "Thank you, son." "Perfect. I'll send a car to pick you up that day. Don't worry about a thing." He hung up quickly, as always. I stayed there with the phone in my hand, feeling a mix of emotion and suspicion. Why now? Why this year? What had changed? The following days were like all the others, but I couldn't stop thinking about that dinner. It made me hopeful. It allowed me to dream that maybe things between Reggie and me could improve, that maybe he had reflected, that maybe he remembered everything I had done for him. A week later, Reggie called again. This time his voice sounded tenser. "Mama, I need to ask you something. Have you talked to Aunt Vivian lately?" The question surprised me. Vivian and I spoke every 2 or 3 months, short conversations. She was always busy. I never had much to tell. "No, I haven't spoken to her in about 2 months. Why?" "No reason. Just curious. Hey, about the dinner. It's better if it's intimate. Just us. Close family. How does that sound?" "Of course, son. Whatever you want." But something about that conversation left me uneasy. Why was he asking about Vivian? What did she have to do with my birthday? Paulette noticed my concern. She always noticed everything. We were having tea in her apartment when I mentioned it. "He says he wants to have a dinner for my birthday," I told her. "But I don't know. He sounds weird, nervous." Paulette put her cup down and looked at me seriously. "Delilah, do you trust your son?" The question hurt. "He's my son. Of course I trust him. Even though he never visits you? Even though he has you living on less than he spends on tips? Even though he lives in a mansion while you count pennies to buy bread? He does what he can for me, I defended him. I always defended him. It was my job. It was what mothers do. And what if he's not doing anything for you? What if he's doing everything against you? Don't say that, I begged, feeling tears threaten to spill. Reggie is not like that, Paulette sighed. She took my hand. Delilah, listen to me. You are a good woman, too good, and good people always end up being trampled by those who have no scruples. I'm not saying your son is evil. I'm just telling you to open your eyes. Don't swallow everything they tell you without chewing first. Her words floated in my head for days. I tried to ignore them. I tried to convince myself that she was wrong, that she was bitter, that she was projecting her own problems onto my life. But at night, when I couldn't sleep, I started asking myself questions. Why was Reggie living so well if I had been left with nothing? Why had my husband left me only that miserable pension if he had worked for 40 years? Why had Reggie handled all the paperwork without letting me see anything? One afternoon, I decided to search. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I needed to find something, anything. I took out the box of documents I had stored in the closet, old papers, paid bills, photos, memories. At the bottom, there was a folder with some documents from my husband's funeral, receipts, certificates, a letter from the attorney who handled everything. The letter was addressed to Reggie. It said something about finalizing the estate's affairs, but it said nothing specific, nothing I could understand. There was a name, Elias Carter, attorney at law with a phone number. I held that paper for a long time. Should I call? What would I say? What right did I have to interfere in things that Reggie had already resolved? But Paulette's words echoed. Open your eyes. Don't swallow everything. I put the paper in my handbag. I didn't call that day or the next, but I carried it with me as if it were a bomb I didn't dare detonate. The Friday before my birthday, Reggie showed up at my apartment without warning. That never happened. He never came without calling first. He knocked on the door, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Son, what a surprise," I said, opening the door. He walked in, looking around as if it were the first time he'd ever visited, as if he'd never seen the poverty I lived in, as if he'd just realized how miserable my life was. "Mama, I need to talk to you," he said without sitting down. "Did something happen? Are you okay?" Yes, I just wanted to confirm that you're coming to dinner on Tuesday. It's important that you're there." "Of course I'll be there. You already told me." He ran his hand through his hair. He was sweating, even though the apartment was cool. "And you haven't talked to anyone? No one has called you asking about Dad? About money things?" My heart started beating faster. No. Who would call me? No one. "I'm just asking. Sometimes there are scammers who call widows, saying there are inheritances or things like that. If anyone calls you, don't pay attention to them and let me know immediately." "All right, son." He gave me a quick kiss on the forehead and left as fast as he arrived. I stood there in the middle of the room, feeling that something terrible was about to happen. I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned, thinking about everything. The strange calls, the unexpected visit, the warnings about scammers, the insistence on the dinner. The next day, I pulled out the paper with the attorney's number. I looked at it for hours. Finally, with trembling hands, I dialed. A secretary answered, "Carter Law Group. Good afternoon." "Good afternoon. I'd like to speak with Mr. Elias Carter. Who may I say is calling?" "Delilah Ames. I'm Jeremiah Ames's widow. He handled some affairs for my husband 5 years ago." There was a pause. "One moment, please." The wait was eternal. I almost hung up 3 times, but something stopped me. Finally, a male voice. "Mrs. Ames, this is Elias Carter. What a surprise to hear from you after so long." "Excuse me for bothering you," I began, my voice trembling. "I just wanted to ask about my husband's papers. You helped with everything after his death." "Yes, that's right." "I worked with your son, Reggie, on all the paperwork. And there was something about a trust fund. The silence on the other end was deafening, so long that I thought the call had been disconnected. "Mrs. Ames," the attorney finally said, his voice very serious. "I think you and I need to talk urgently." My birthday dawned gray, as if the sky knew what I still refused to accept. I woke up early, even though the dinner was in the evening. I couldn't sleep thinking about the conversation with the attorney, Elias Carter. After that call, he had asked me to meet him. He told me there were things I needed to know, things that should have been told to me 5 years ago. But I asked him to wait. I told him I had a family dinner and that we could talk afterward. I don't know why I did that. Maybe because a part of me still wanted to believe that everything was a misunderstanding, that my son hadn't betrayed me. Paulette knocked on my door mid-morning. She brought a small cake with 1 candle. "So you don't spend your birthday without blowing out at least 1 candle," she said with a sad smile. We sat in my living room, eating cake with watery coffee. She looked at me as if she wanted to say something but didn't dare. "What's wrong?" I asked her. "You're acting stranger than usual. Did something happen?" I told her about the call to the attorney, about his mysterious words, about the feeling that something terrible was about to be revealed. Paulette set her plate aside. "Delilah, listen to me carefully. Wherever you go tonight, don't stay quiet. If something doesn't seem right, say something. If anyone disrespects you, get up and leave. You don't owe anyone anything, especially not the person who has made you feel small your whole life." "He's my son," I whispered. "And you are his mother, the one who worked herself ragged for him, the one who sold even her wedding ring to give him a future. Don't forget that when he tries to make you feel like you're the one who should be thanking him." Her words resonated deeply with me. She hugged me tightly before leaving. "Call me when you get home. I don't care what time it is." I was left alone, watching the clock. The hours passed slowly, like torture. I took a bath. I put on the only decentish dress I had, a faded brown dress that at least had no holes. I styled my hair in front of the mirror and saw myself, tired, worn out, 75 years, a whole life. And for what? To be alone in a miserable apartment, waiting for my son to give me crumbs of attention once a year. Reggie sent a rideshare to pick me up at 7 o'clock. The driver was kind. He asked if I was going to a celebration. I told him yes, it was my birthday. He wished me a happy birthday. I thanked him. I didn't tell him I felt like I was going to my own funeral. When the car stopped in front of Reggie's house, my stomach twisted. The house was lit up. 3 stories of luxury that I never understood how my son could afford. Perfect gardens, expensive cars in the driveway, everything so different from the apartment where I counted pennies to buy rice. I rang the doorbell. Chelsea opened the door. She wore a dress that probably cost more than my 6 months' rent. Her smile was perfect. Too perfect. "Delilah, so glad you made it. Happy birthday." She gave me 2 air kisses, not even touching my cheek. I stepped inside, and the smell of expensive food hit me. Shrimp, wine, freshly baked bread, everything I couldn't afford. She led me to the living room. Reggie was there with the children. He stood up to greet me. "Mama, happy birthday." He hugged me, but it was an empty hug, the kind you give out of obligation. The grandchildren greeted me from the sofa without standing up. They muttered a mechanical, "Hi, Grandma," and went back to their phones. I sat in a chair, feeling like I was in the way at my own celebration. Chelsea brought wine glasses. "Would you like one, Delilah?" "No, thank you. Water is fine." "Are you sure? It's a very nice imported Cabernet." "I'm sure." Reggie was nervous. I could tell. He shifted a lot. He looked at his phone every 2 minutes. He made conversation, but his words sounded hollow, rehearsed. 30 minutes passed of forced conversation, superficial questions about my health, comments about the weather. Nothing real, nothing deep. I just wanted the dinner to end quickly so I could leave. And then the doorbell rang. Reggie turned pale. Chelsea almost dropped her glass, but caught it before it shattered. They looked at each other with an expression I couldn't decipher. Fear, panic, something like that. "Are you expecting someone else?" I asked. "No," Reggie said quickly. Too quickly. "It must be a mistake." But the doorbell rang again, more insistently. This time, Chelsea went to open it. I heard voices at the entrance. A woman's voice I recognized immediately, even though I hadn't heard it in months. Vivian, my sister, walked into the living room like a hurricane, elegant as always, gray tailored suit, high heels, expensive perfume, perfect hair. She carried a large gift wrapped in gold paper and a bottle of wine. "Delilah!" she exclaimed, excited to see me. She ran to hug me. A real hug, the kind that squeezes tight. "Happy birthday, sister. 75 years. I can't believe it." I was in shock. "Vivian, I didn't know you were coming. I wanted to surprise you. Reggie told me you were having a birthday dinner, and I couldn't miss it. 75 years doesn't happen every day." I looked at Reggie. It was obvious from his face that he hadn't told her anything. Vivian had come on her own, and he hadn't expected her. He hadn't wanted her there. "Aunt Vivian, what a surprise," Reggie said, his voice tense. "We didn't know you were coming." "That's why it's a surprise, nephew." Vivian sat next to me and took my hand. "How are you, Delilah? You look thinner." "I'm fine," I lied. "Are you sure? Are you eating well? Do you have enough with what you have?" The questions made me uncomfortable, not because they were rude, but because they were real, because they touched the truth I always hid. Yes, everything is fine." Vivian looked at me as if she didn't believe me, but she didn't insist. Instead, she turned to Reggie and Chelsea. "What a beautiful house you have. Every time I visit, I'm more surprised. How's the business, Reggie?" "Good. Everything's going well." "I'm glad because I know it's not easy to maintain a lifestyle like this. The private schools for the children, the cars, this house, it all costs money. But I imagine with the investments you made, you've done very well." Reggie cleared his throat. "I've been lucky." "Luck helps, but so does the initial capital, right?" The air thickened. I didn't understand why, but something in Vivian's tone was different, as if she were playing a game whose rules only she knew. Chelsea reappeared from the kitchen. "Dinner is ready." We moved to the enormous dining room, a wooden table that could seat 12 people. Fine china, silver cutlery, cloth napkins, everything so elegant, everything so far removed from my reality. They seated me at the head of the table as the guest of honor. Vivian sat on my right. Reggie and Chelsea were across from me, and the children sat silently and bored at the ends. The food was exquisite. Salad with ingredients I didn't recognize, baked salmon, potatoes with herbs, expensive wine that everyone drank but me, polite conversation that said nothing. And then Vivian put her fork down on the plate, took a long sip of wine, looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, and said the words that would change everything. "Delilah, I want to ask you something that's been on my mind for a while. Are you enjoying your $500,000 trust fund?" The world stopped. The noise in the dining room vanished. All I could hear was my heart pounding in my ears. $500,000. Trust fund. The words made no sense. "What trust fund are you talking about?" I asked, my voice trembling. Vivian frowned. "The trust fund your husband Jeremiah left for you before he passed. I was present when he signed the documents. $500,000, so you could have a dignified old age, so you would never lack for anything." Tears began to sting my eyes. "I don't know anything about that." Vivian put her glass down with a dry thud. Her face completely changed. She was no longer the sweet sister. She was the relentless businesswoman. She turned to Reggie and Chelsea. "What did you do with the money?" The silence that followed that question was so heavy, I could feel it crushing my chest. Reggie and Chelsea were completely motionless, like pillars of salt, as if time itself had frozen just for them. My grandchildren looked confused, darting their eyes from one adult to another, not understanding what was happening. I didn't fully understand either, but something inside me already knew the truth. I had known it since the call with the attorney. I had known it since Reggie's strange visits. Maybe I had known it for 5 years, but I refused to see it. "Aunt Vivian," Reggie began, his voice shaky, "I think there's a misunderstanding here." "There is no misunderstanding," Vivian cut him off with a coldness I had never heard from her. "I was there in Attorney Elias Carter's office. Your father asked me to witness the signing of those documents. $500,000 in an irrevocable trust for Delilah with guaranteed monthly payments for life. $4,000 monthly. Everything legally protected, so she would never have to worry about money. $4,000 a month. I was living on $750. The words wouldn't fit in my head. They couldn't be real. "Mama," Reggie said, finally looking at me, "let me explain." But Vivian raised her hand. "No, answer my question first. Where is that money? Why is your mother living in a miserable apartment on a pension that barely covers her food? Why does she know nothing about the trust?" Chelsea got up so fast her chair nearly fell over. "I need to go to the bathroom," she muttered, practically running out of the dining room. The children also got up. "Can we go to our rooms?" the older one asked. "Go," Reggie said without looking at them. It was just the three of us, Vivian furious, Reggie terrified, and me in the middle, feeling my world crumble piece by piece. "Reggie," I said, with a voice I didn't recognize as mine, "is what your aunt says true?" He ran his hands over his face. He was sweating. His hands were shaking. "Mama, it's complicated." "It's not complicated," Vivian interjected. "It's quite simple. Yes or no, did you know about the trust fund?" Silence. "You knew," my sister insisted. "Yes," Reggie finally whispered. "I knew." The words hit me like stones, like physical blows, like a betrayal that stole my breath. "And why didn't I know?" I asked, feeling the tears start to fall uncontrollably. Reggie wouldn't look me in the eye. "Dad named me the administrator of the trust. He left me in charge of managing everything. I thought it was better to use it for investments, to make the money grow, to secure the family's future." "The future of which family?" Vivian asked with contempt. "Your future, because you clearly didn't care about your mother's future. She is the beneficiary, not you. That money was for her." "I was going to give it to her," Reggie defended himself weakly, "when the time was right." "When?" I shouted. I couldn't hold back any more. 75 years of holding everything in silence, and finally, something inside me snapped. "When was the right time, Reggie? When I was starving, when I couldn't pay my rent anymore." "Mama, it's not like that." "Then how is it?" My voice was shaking with rage and pain. "Tell me, how is it that for 5 years I have lived on less than $800 a month while you had my money? Tell me, how is it that I've sold my belongings just to eat while you bought luxury cars? Tell me, how is it that I felt like a burden to you when you were living off what was mine the entire time?" Vivian pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Elias Carter right now. He has all the documents, all the proof, and we are going to settle this once and for all." "Auntie, wait," Reggie pleaded. "It's not necessary." "Oh, yes, it is necessary." Vivian was already dialing the number. "Very necessary." Reggie looked at me with pleading eyes. "Mama, please, we can fix this within the family. We don't need to involve attorneys." "Fix it how?" I asked. "By giving me the crumbs you decide to give me when it suits you? By continuing to lie to me?" Chelsea returned to the dining room. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. She stood next to the door, as if ready to bolt at any moment. Vivian held the phone to her ear. "Elias, it's Vivian Ellington. I'm here with my sister Delilah. We need you to come immediately. Yes, it's about the Jeremiah Ames Trust Fund." Pause. "Excellent. We'll wait for you." She hung up and looked at us all. "He's coming here. He's bringing all the documents. We're going to resolve this tonight." "You can't do this," Chelsea said, in a high-pitched, whiny voice. "This is our house, and that is my sister's money." Vivian replied coldly. "The money you stole." "We didn't steal anything," Reggie protested. "I was the legal administrator. I had the right to make decisions. You had the right to administer the money for your mother's benefit, not for your own." Vivian stepped closer to him. Do you know what that's called? Embezzlement, fraud, theft, and it can land you in prison. Reggie paled further. I didn't want to hurt Mama. I just thought I could make better use of the money, invest it, multiply it. And did you multiply it? Vivian asked. Where are the original $500,000 plus 5 years of investment gains? Because from what I can see, they're in this house, in those cars, in those expensive clothes your wife is wearing, all built with your mother's money, while she was going hungry. I remained seated, listening to everything as if it were a movie, as if it weren't my life, as if they weren't talking about my son who had robbed me, lied to me, and let me suffer while he lived like a king with my money. Reggie, I finally said, my voice calm, too calm, the calm that comes after a storm. Look me in the eyes. He slowly looked up. Did you ever feel guilty? Ever? In these 5 years, did you ever think about me living alone in that horrible apartment while you slept in your expensive sheeted bed, bought with my money? Mama, Answer, yes or no. Silence. That silence told me everything I needed to know. And you? I turned to Chelsea. You knew. She nodded, almost imperceptibly, cowardly to the end. She couldn't even admit it out loud. You too, I said, getting up from the chair. You watched me struggle. You watched me count pennies. You watched me wear the same worn-out clothes over and over. You watched me turn down invitations because I didn't even have bus fare. And you said nothing. You did nothing. You kept taking my money and letting me believe I was a burden to you. Tears were falling, but my voice wasn't shaking. Something had changed inside me. Something had broken, but something had also been fortified. The worst part, I continued, it's not that you stole the money. The worst part is that you stole my dignity. You made me feel useless, stupid, an old woman good for nothing. You made me believe I had to thank you for the crumbs you gave me, and all the while you knew the truth. Reggie tried to approach, but I raised my hand. Don't touch me. Mama, forgive me. I can give it all back. I swear that— With what? Vivian asked. Because if you spent it all on this life of luxury, where are you going to get $500,000 plus 5 years of monthly payments you never gave her? We're talking about more than $700,000. The figure made me dizzy. $700,000, a lifetime of security that they had taken from me. The doorbell rang. Vivian went to open it. She returned with a man in his 60s, dark suit, leather briefcase, serious expression. Good evening, the man said. I am Elias Carter. I regret that we are meeting under these circumstances, Mrs. Ames. I stood up. My legs were shaking. You spoke with me on the phone. That's right, and I deeply regret not having insisted on speaking with you directly 5 years ago. I assumed your son had informed you of everything. That was my mistake. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. He placed it on the dining table. Everything is here. The will, the trust agreement, the administration documents, everything signed by your husband and by Reggie as administrator. He opened the folder and began showing me papers. My vision was blurry from tears, but I could see the figures. $500,000, monthly payments of $4,000. My name on all the documents as the sole beneficiary. Your husband was very clear, Elias explained. This money was only for you. Reggie had authorization to administer it, but with the legal obligation to deliver the monthly payments to you without fail. Any diversion of those funds for personal use constitutes a crime. Reggie slumped into a chair. Chelsea was crying silently. I remained standing, looking at those papers that represented the deepest betrayal I had ever experienced. Elias Carter spread the documents on the table as if they were cards in a macabre game. Every paper was more proof of the lie I had lived for 5 years. I looked at them without being able to fully process them. My brain refused to accept that all this was real. Mrs. Ames, the attorney said, his voice firm but not cruel, did you receive any monthly payments from this trust fund in the last 5 years? No, I replied in a strained voice. I didn't know it existed. Were the terms of your husband's will ever explained to you? Reggie told me there were some debts, that we had to sell the family home to pay them, that only a small pension was left for me. Elias shook his head. There were no debts. The house was sold, yes, but the money from that sale, plus your husband's savings and life insurance, amounted to the $500,000 that constituted the trust fund. Everything was designated for you. I sat down before I fell. My legs wouldn't support me. The house, too? Also, your husband left clear instructions to sell the property and add that value to the trust to maximize your monthly income. You should have been living comfortably on $4,000 a month without worries. $4,000 a month for 5 years. I did the quick calculation in my head. $240,000 that I never saw. $240,000 that my son had used while I counted pennies to buy bread. Reggie, Elias said, turning to my son, where is the money? My son had his head in his hands. I invested it. In what? In this house, in the business, in the kids' schools, in everything. Do you have records of those investments, account statements, documents proving that this money was invested with the intention of generating profit for your mother? Silence. I'll ask you another way, the attorney continued. Can you return the original $500,000 plus the monthly payments you owed your mother? More silence. Chelsea was sobbing harder. He can't now, Vivian said with contempt. He spent it all on luxuries, on appearances, on living a life that wasn't his. Elias pulled out more papers. Here are the bank statements for the trust fund. During the first year after your husband's death, Reggie transferred $50,000 for the down payment on this house. Another $100,000 went into renovations, $30,000 for a car, and so on. In 2 years, he had almost completely emptied the principal fund. And the other 3 years? Vivian asked. Loans against the trust fund, more transfers, small amounts here and there that total significant figures. By the time we realized, there was practically nothing left. We realized, I repeated. You knew all of this. Elias lowered his gaze. For the first time, the attorney looked ashamed. I knew Reggie was making movements. He is the legal administrator, so technically he had authorization, but I assumed you were aware that he consulted you, that there was a family agreement. I never imagined you knew nothing. Why didn't you reach out to me to confirm? My voice sounded harsher than I intended. I should have. It is my professional responsibility, and I offer my sincerest apologies. But I must also tell you that Reggie assured me several times that you were well cared for, that you were living with them, that you didn't need the money monthly because he covered all your expenses. I looked at Reggie with a mix of horror and disgust. You told him I was living with you? Reggie didn't answer. He couldn't even look at me. You told him that? I shouted. I no longer cared about controlling myself. You lied to the attorney, telling him you were taking care of me while I was living alone, eating canned soup. Mama, I thought that eventually I would bring you to live with us. When? In 10 more years? Never. That was another lie you told yourself to sleep soundly at night. Chelsea finally spoke. Her voice was shrill and pathetic. We wanted to help you, Delilah, but we had expenses. The children need so many things. The house is expensive to maintain. It wasn't out of malice. Vivian laughed, but it wasn't a cheerful laugh. It was a laugh filled with scorn. It wasn't out of malice. Then what was it? Ignorance? Greed? You justify stealing from an elderly woman because your children need to go to private schools? We didn't steal from her, Chelsea insisted weakly. Yes, you did, Elias said with legal firmness. That is exactly what you did. Misappropriation of fiduciary funds, fraud, financial abuse of an elder. All of those are criminal offenses, in addition to civil ones. Fear settled on Reggie's face. Criminal? But I'm her son. She won't press charges. Everyone looked at me. I stayed silent. I didn't know what I was feeling. Too many emotions at once. Pain, rage, betrayal, but also something new. something I hadn't felt in years. Power, the feeling that I finally had control. "What remains of the trust fund?" Vivian asked Elias. The attorney reviewed his papers. "Approximately $30,000 is all that hasn't been squandered. 30,000 out of 500,000. My husband had worked his whole life to secure my future, and his own son had destroyed it in less than 5 years. And what options does my sister have?" Vivian continued. Elias adjusted his glasses. "Several. She can file a civil lawsuit to recover the funds plus damages. She can file a criminal complaint for fraud and embezzlement, or she can try to reach a private agreement with her son for the return of the money." "Which do you recommend?" Vivian asked. "It depends on what Mrs. Ames wants to achieve. If she wants to recover her money quickly, a private agreement might be faster. If she wants justice and real consequences, the legal path is more appropriate, although longer." I got up from the chair and walked to the window. Outside, everything looked normal. The perfectly manicured lawn, the streetlights illuminating the neighborhood of expensive houses. None of it was real. Everything was an illusion built with my money and my suffering. "Mama," Reggie said behind me, "please talk to me. Tell me what you want me to do." I turned around slowly. I looked him in the eyes, those eyes that once looked at me with a child's love, those eyes that now only reflected fear and guilt. "What do I want you to do?" I repeated his words. "I want you to tell me the truth, for the first time in 5 years. Did you plan this from the beginning? As soon as Dad died, did you already know you were going to keep my money?" "No, it wasn't like that. At first, I only took a little for the down payment on the house. I thought I would pay it back, but then we needed more and more, and it got out of hand." "And you never thought of telling me the truth? Of giving me at least some of what was mine?" He looked down. "I was afraid you would get angry, that you would judge me. And you preferred to leave me to live in misery? You preferred to see me suffer rather than face your mistake? You thought I was fine, that I didn't need so much, that I was happy with my simple life." Those words pierced me like knives. Happy. Do you think I was happy starving? Happy wearing clothes with holes? Happy feeling like a burden to you every time I asked for $200 miserable dollars? "Mama!" "Don't call me Mama. A mother to you was someone to use and discard, someone whose sacrifice was worth nothing, someone you could lie to and steal from without remorse." Chelsea approached timidly. "Delilah, please think about the children. If this goes public, if there's a trial, they will suffer. They will lose their father." I looked at her incredulously. "You're asking me to think about your children? You who never thought about me? What are you going to tell them when they ask why their father is in trouble? That he robbed their grandmother and she had the audacity to defend herself?" Vivian stood next to me. "You don't have to decide anything now, Delilah. Take your time. Think carefully about what you want." Elias closed his briefcase. "Mrs. Ames, I will prepare a complete report of everything for you. Bank movements, transfers, everything documented. Then you decide what to do with that information." "How long do I have to decide?" I asked. "Legally, you have several years to file a lawsuit, but I recommend acting soon. The more time passes, the harder it will be to recover the assets." I nodded. My head was spinning. I needed to get out of there. I needed air. I needed to be alone to process all this. "I'm leaving," I announced. "I'll take you," Vivian said immediately. Reggie took a step forward. "Mama, wait. Don't leave like this. We can talk more. We can—" "There is nothing more to talk about tonight," I interrupted him. "You did what you did. Now, I'm going to do what I have to do." I walked toward the door. Vivian followed me. Elias gathered his papers and walked with us. Before leaving, I turned around one last time. Reggie was standing in the middle of his expensive living room, in his luxurious house, surrounded by everything he bought with my money. He looked small, scared, but I no longer felt pity for him. "Happy birthday to me," I said, and I left. The silence in Vivian's car was almost deafening. She drove, focused on the road. I sat in the passenger seat, my gaze lost out the window. The city lights passed by blurred. Or maybe it was because I couldn't stop crying. They weren't loud tears. I wasn't sobbing. I was just letting them fall while my head tried to process everything that had just happened. My 75th birthday had been the worst and the most revealing night of my life. The day I discovered that for 5 years I had been the victim of my own son. "Do you want me to take you to your apartment?" Vivian asked softly. "Yes," I whispered. We drove in silence for another 15 minutes. When we arrived at my building, Vivian turned off the engine. "Do you want me to come up with you?" "No, I need to be alone." "Delilah, you shouldn't be alone tonight. You just received a terrible blow." "I've been alone for 5 years. One more night won't change anything," Vivian sighed. "At least promise me you'll call me if you need anything. Anytime, I don't care." I nodded. I got out of the car and walked to the entrance. My legs felt heavy, as if I were carrying the whole world. I climbed the stairs slowly. Every step was an effort. When I finally reached my door, my hands were shaking so much that I struggled to put the key in the lock. I stepped into the apartment and saw it with new eyes. This miserable place, this tiny room, this kitchen where barely one person fit, this bathroom with perpetually leaky pipes. All of this had been my life, while my son lived like a king. I sat down on the old second-hand sofa and finally let everything out. I cried harder than I had since my husband's funeral. I cried for the 5 lost years, for the nights of hunger, for the shame of not being able to buy my grandchildren a decent Christmas gift, for every time I felt useless and old and like a burden. But I also cried from rage, a rage that had been bottled up for 75 years, rage against a world that taught me to be quiet, against a life that taught me to endure, against myself for accepting everything without ever questioning it. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark. Eventually, I heard a knock at the door. It was Paulette. "I saw you arrive," she said when I opened it. She carried 2 steaming mugs. "I made tea, and I won't take no for an answer." I let her in. We sat together on the sofa. She didn't ask me anything, she just waited. And after taking a sip of tea, I told her everything, every word, every revelation, every betrayal. Paulette listened in silence. When I finished, she put her mug on the table and took my hands. "Delilah, do you know what just happened tonight? I found out my son robbed me." "No, well, yes, but something more important happened too. You stopped swallowing. You stopped being quiet. For the first time in your life, you demanded answers. You demanded the truth. And that, my friend, is the beginning of everything." "I don't feel strong," I admitted. "I feel destroyed." Being destroyed and being weak are not the same thing. Sometimes you have to completely fall apart so you can rebuild yourself the right way, without the lies, without the weight of others' expectations. Her words resonated with me. She was right. Something had changed tonight. I hadn't just discovered the truth, I had also discovered my voice. The voice I had silenced for 75 years because I was taught that good women don't complain, that good mothers forgive everything, that good wives obey. "What are you going to do?" Paulette asked. "I don't know yet. The attorney is going to send me all the documentation. I have options, but I don't know which one to choose." "Which one scares you the most?" The question took me by surprise. "Fear." "Yes. Sometimes what scares us the most is what we need to do most." I thought about it. What scared me most? Suing Reggie? Pressing criminal charges? Destroying the perfect image he had built? No. What scared me most was something else. "I'm afraid to be free," I said quietly. "I'm afraid to have money. I'm afraid not to need him because then I won't have an excuse to continue being invisible, to continue being small, to continue accepting crumbs." Paulette smiled sadly. "That is exactly what you need to face." She stayed with me late. When she finally left, I stayed awake in the dark, thinking, remembering, processing. I remembered the little girl I was, the one who dreamed of being a teacher. But my parents said women didn't need to study that much, that it was better to marry young and start a family. I remembered the young woman who wanted to work, but my husband said wives stayed home, that her job was to care for the children and keep the house clean. I remembered the mother who wanted to do things for herself, but my children told me to rest, that I had done enough, that they would take care of everything. My whole life had been a series of voices telling me what to do, what to think, what to feel, and I had obeyed because I believed that was love. I believed that sacrificing myself was the right thing to do. I believed that disappearing was noble. But tonight, I had learned something. Sacrifice without reciprocity is not love. It is self-destruction. And I had been destroying myself for 75 years, believing I was being virtuous. The next few days were strange. Elias Carter sent me all the documentation as promised. Thick folders filled with papers that showed every dollar Reggie had taken, every transfer, every lie documented in bank statements. Vivian visited me every day. She helped me review the documents. She explained legal terms I didn't understand. She reminded me again and again that I had done nothing wrong, that the fault lay entirely with Reggie. Reggie called many times. He left messages, pleading messages, messages where he promised to give everything back, messages where he cried and asked for forgiveness. I didn't answer any of them. I wasn't ready. Chelsea called too. Her messages were different. They were justifications. They were attempts to make me feel guilty. Think about the family. Don't be selfish. The children need you. As if I owed them anything after what they had done to me. Paulette accompanied me in the afternoons. We had tea. We talked about everything and nothing. She shared stories of her own life, of how her children had also disappointed her at certain times, of how she had learned to set boundaries, to say no, and to choose herself without feeling guilty. "Do you know the difference between us and our daughter's generation?" she asked me one day. "They learned they could have it all. We learned we deserved nothing, and both lessons are wrong." A week after my birthday, Vivian arrived with a proposal. "I've been talking with Elias," she said, sitting on my sofa, "and I think we have a strategy." "What kind of strategy?" "One that gives you back your money, but also your dignity. One that makes Reggie face the consequences, but without completely destroying the children who are innocent in all this." I listened as Vivian explained the plan. It was intelligent, it was fair, but it was also relentless. It required me to be firm, to not back down, to not let guilt or maternal love make me retreat. "Can I do it?" I asked out loud, though the question was more for myself. "You can," Vivian affirmed, "but only if you really want to. No one will judge you if you decide to forgive and forget. It's your decision. What would you do?" My sister looked at me steadily. "I already know what I would do, but I'm not you. I didn't spend 5 years living in this apartment. I didn't have to sell my belongings to eat. I didn't have to endure my own son making me feel like garbage while he lived off my money. This decision is yours alone." I didn't sleep that night. I walked around the small apartment, thinking, weighing options, imagining futures. Finally, when the sun began to rise, I knew what I was going to do, and for the first time in 5 years, maybe in 75 years, I felt sure of a decision, not because someone told me it was the right thing to do, but because I knew it was. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I looked at the woman staring back at me. She was 75 years old, deep wrinkles, completely white hair, hands worn by years of cleaning and cooking and serving others. But I also saw something new in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before. Determination, strength, the kind of strength that doesn't come from shouting or fighting, the kind of strength that comes from knowing your worth and never letting anyone take it away again. "I don't need to raise my voice to be heard," I told my reflection. "I just need to stop lowering it." I picked up the phone and dialed Elias Carter's number. When he answered, I said the words that would change everything. "I want to press charges. We're going to recover what's mine, and we're going to do it the right way, with justice, with dignity, but without pity." 3 days later, Reggie and Chelsea were sitting across from me in Elias Carter's office. The attorney had organized this meeting as part of the strategy, a final chance to resolve everything without going to court. an opportunity that I would completely control. Reggie looked terrible, sunken eyes, unshaven stubble, wrinkled clothes. Chelsea was stiff in her chair, arms crossed, with a victimized expression that made me nauseous. Vivian was sitting beside me. Elias was at his desk with a mountain of documents in front of him. I was in the center, calm, firm, ready. "Thank you for coming," Elias began. "We are here to reach an agreement that avoids a long and costly legal process for both parties." "Mama," Reggie interrupted immediately, "I just want to tell you I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know there's no forgiveness for what I did, but I swear I'll give it all back." I raised my hand. "Don't talk yet. First, you're going to listen." He went quiet. He looked like a scolded child, but I no longer felt pity for him. "For 5 years," I began, my voice quiet but firm, "you robbed me. You lied to me. You left me to live in poverty while you spent my money on luxuries. You made me feel like a burden, that I had to thank you for the crumbs you gave me. All that time you knew the truth and you said nothing." "Mama, I'm not finished," I cut him off. "You had 1,000 chances to tell me the truth, 1,000 chances to do the right thing, and every time you chose the lie. You chose your comfort over my well-being. So now the rules have changed. Now I choose." Elias placed the documents on the table. "These are the options. Option 1. We file a civil lawsuit for misappropriation of fiduciary funds. We seek the complete return of the money plus damages. That includes accrued interest and compensation for emotional distress. We're talking about approximately $800,000. Reggie paled. "I don't have $800,000. "Then you sell this house," Vivian said coldly. "You sell the cars, liquidate everything, and if it's not enough, you work the rest of your life paying the debt." "Option 2, Elias continued. "We file criminal charges, fraud, financial abuse of an elder, embezzlement. These are crimes that can carry 5 to 10 years in prison." Chelsea sobbed. "You can't do that. The children need their father." "The children need to learn that actions have consequences," I replied. "That stealing from your own mother doesn't go unpunished." "Option 3, Elias said. "We reach a private agreement. You return the money on the terms your mother sets. You sign legal documents acknowledging the debt, and if you default, we automatically proceed with options 1 and 2. "What would the terms be?" Reggie asked, his voice cracking. I looked at Elias. He nodded. It was my turn to speak. "You will sell the house," I said immediately. "That house was bought with my money. It no longer belongs to you." "Where are we going to live?" Chelsea asked hysterically. "Where you can afford to live with your own money, just as I had to do for 5 years. You will liquidate the investment accounts," I continued. "You will sell the luxury car. You will transfer all that money to a new account in my name that Elias will administer." "All of that won't be enough," Reggie said. "The house has a mortgage. I owe money." "Then you will work to pay it back. You will pay me $3,000 a month for the next 20 years if necessary, legally signed with interest. And if you miss a single payment, I will proceed with the lawsuit and the criminal charges." "That's too much," Chelsea protested. "We have expenses. The children can go to public schools," Vivian interrupted her, "like millions of children in this country. They won't die from not having private tennis lessons." "Furthermore," I added, "I want something else. I want you to tell your children the truth. I want you to explain to them exactly what you did, to teach them that stealing is wrong, even when it's from family, especially when it's from family." Tears were falling down Reggie's face. "Mama, are you going to destroy my family?" "No," I said firmly. "You destroyed your family when you chose to rob me. I am only reclaiming what is mine. And if your family doesn't survive this, it's because it was built on lies from the beginning." Elias pushed the documents toward Reggie. "You have 2 options. Do you sign this agreement now, or do we see you in court next week? You decide." Reggie looked at the papers, looked at Chelsea, looked at Vivian. Finally, he looked at me, searching for compassion, hoping I would yield, searching for the mother who always forgave everything. But that mother no longer existed. "Sign," I said, "or face the full consequences of your actions." With trembling hands, Reggie picked up the pen. He read the documents. Every page was a reminder of his betrayal. Every clause was a debt he would have to pay. I sign. Chelsea also had to sign as a co-debtor. Both committed to returning everything, selling everything, paying me monthly, and facing severe legal consequences if they defaulted. When they finished, Elias collected the documents. "These are legally binding. You have 30 days to sell the property and transfer the initial funds. The monthly payments begin the following month." Reggie remained seated there, destroyed. But I didn't feel victory. I only felt a deep exhaustion. The exhaustion of 75 years of carrying the expectations of others. "Is there anything else you want to say to me?" I asked him. "Will you ever forgive me?" His voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "Maybe. Maybe not. But that no longer depends on you. You did what you did. Now I'm going to live my life, with or without your repentance." I stood up. Vivian walked with me. We left that office, leaving behind a son who had learned the hardest lesson of his life, the lesson that mothers also have limits, that love doesn't mean allowing abuse, that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or allowing it to happen again. Outside, the sun was shining. It was a beautiful day, and for the first time in 5 years, I could see the beauty without it being stained by worry over money. "How do you feel?" Vivian asked. "Free," I replied. "Finally free." 6 months later, I was sitting on the balcony of my new apartment drinking coffee. Not watery instant coffee, but real coffee, made from freshly ground beans, the kind of coffee I had always seen in stores but never allowed myself to buy. The apartment wasn't large, but it was mine. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, a bathroom that worked, and this small balcony where I could watch the sunrise every morning. I had rented it with the money recovered from the sale of Reggie's house. Elias had handled everything impeccably. The house sold in 3 weeks. After paying off the mortgage and debts, $200,000 went directly into my account. The cars were sold, the accounts were liquidated. In total, I had recovered nearly $300,000. It wasn't the original $500,000, but it was enough, more than enough for a 75-year-old woman who only needed peace and dignity. Elias had reinvested the money in a new trust fund. This time, I was the sole administrator. No one else had access. No one else could make decisions about my future. The monthly payments of $2,500 arrived promptly in my account every month, and Reggie complied with his additional $3,000. For now. Vivian visited me often. Sometimes we went out to lunch at nice restaurants. Other times, we just walked in the park, talking about life. She had helped me open my eyes, find my voice, and understand that being strong doesn't mean yelling. It means knowing your worth and not letting anyone take it away. Paulette was still my friend. Well, we no longer lived in the same building, but we saw each other almost every day. We drank tea and shared stories. She had taught me that true friendship doesn't require shared blood. It only requires mutual respect and honesty. Reggie and I didn't talk much. He called once a month, short, uncomfortable conversations. He told me they had rented a smaller apartment, that Chelsea had had to find a job, that the children were adapting to public school. He asked me how I was. I answered in monosyllables. I hadn't forgiven him. I wasn't sure if I ever would, but there was something more important than forgiveness. I had found peace. Peace with what happened, peace with my decisions, peace with myself. The grandchildren sent me texts sometimes, short, confused messages. Reggie had told them a softened version of the truth. He had told them he had made a mistake with Grandma's money and that he was trying to make amends. The children didn't fully understand, but that was okay. They would understand someday. I had started doing things I never allowed myself to do. I took painting classes. It turned out I had a talent for landscapes. Nothing professional, but I liked it. It made me happy, and that was enough. I joined a book club at the neighborhood library. Women my age who met once a week to talk about books. Some had stories similar to mine. Children who had disappointed them. families who had used them. We were all learning to live for ourselves after 75 years of living for others. One afternoon, while painting on my balcony, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated to answer, but something told me to do it. "Mrs. Ames," a young woman's voice said. "Yes, this is she. My name is Maria. I'm a social worker from the community center. One of the women in your book club told our coordinator your story, and we were wondering if you would be interested in speaking with other elderly women who are experiencing family financial abuse." I stayed quiet, processing the proposal. "You don't have to decide now," Maria continued, "but we believe your experience could help other women find their voice, to understand that they are not alone." "Let me think about it," I replied. I couldn't sleep that night, thinking about that call. Me helping others? Me sharing my story? For 75 years, I had been invisible, silent. Now I was going to speak publicly. I told Vivian about it the next day. She smiled. "Remember what I told you months ago, that sometimes you have to fall apart to rebuild yourself correctly? You fell apart. You rebuilt yourself, and now you can help others do the same." "I'm scared," I admitted. "Fear is good," she said. "It means it matters. It means it's real." A week later, I was sitting in a circle of 10 women at the community center, all over 60, all with stories of families who had used them, robbed them, and made them feel invisible. I told them my story without embellishment, without softening it, the complete truth, the trust fund, the betrayal, the poverty, and also the recovery, the justice, the peace. When I finished, there were tears in everyone's eyes, but there was also something else: hope, recognition, the understanding that they weren't crazy, that they weren't alone, that there was a way forward. One woman timidly raised her hand. "How did you find the courage to face them?" "I didn't find it," I replied honestly. "I built it day by day, decision by decision, by stopping swallowing what was poisoning me, by learning that my voice mattered, that my life mattered, that I mattered." It's been almost a year since that birthday night, since the revelation that changed everything. I still live in my apartment with the balcony. I still paint. I still read. I still drink real coffee every morning. But I also do something else. Twice a month, I meet with that group of women. I help them understand their rights. I accompany them to talk to attorneys. I support them when they are afraid. I remind them that it's not selfish to take care of themselves, that it's not cruel to set boundaries, and that they deserve dignity regardless of their age. Reggie is still paying. Chelsea is still working. The grandchildren are growing up. Maybe someday our relationship will improve, or maybe not, but that no longer defines my worth or my happiness. This morning, as I drank coffee and watched the sunrise, I thought about the entire journey. The woman I was a year ago, invisible, quiet, convinced that her only value was in serving others. And I looked at the woman I am now, visible, with a voice, convinced that her value is simply in existing. I got up and went to the mirror. The same 75-year-old woman looked back at me, the same wrinkles, the same white hair, but the eyes were different. They no longer reflected resignation. They reflected peace, strength, purpose. "They stole my years and called it care," I said to my reflection, but I reclaimed them in silence, with truth and with courage. I smiled. A real smile, one that comes from the soul because I finally understood something fundamental. Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it is silent. Strength is not always violent. Sometimes it is serene. And freedom doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes it comes from within, from deciding that you deserve more and then doing what is necessary to achieve it. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.